Burnley.
Anyway, that's a different channel altogether. Sorry. Let's talk about cost of living to start with, should we? Michael Lewis, the boss of E.ON, he's been talking about it, as you know. He says 40% of people could be in fuel poverty by October. George Osborne says a windfall tax is inevitable. It is, isn't it?
Well, we continue to look at this situation very, very close. I mean, the first thing to say is we've put together a package worth £22 billion so far this year, of which £9 billion is targeted directly at measures affecting energy. And we recognise that there is a real challenge for households up and down the country, which will likely get worse in the autumn when the next round of the energy price cap kicks in. So yes, we do want to make sure that we take the action that we need. What I would say is that we want to make sure we get the action that we take right. On the concept of a windfall tax itself, we are very, very clear that there is a real need at a time when the industry is making very significant profits to see those profits reinvested in new offshore installations, getting more out of the North Sea at a time which is obviously vital in terms of energy supply, but also good for jobs and the wider economy. If we do not see that investment materialise, then we are very clear that all options are on the table.
Not,
Sorry,
why would it not?
Why would it? Well, ultimately, that's a question for the industry to answer.
But they're saying they still would, aren't they? BP, the head of BP said he still would, even if there was a windfall.
Well, I was present at a summit that the Prime Minister held at Number 10 a few months ago with the industry itself. And we were talking about the incentives for the industry to get stuck in the North Sea and to actually make sure that we get the capacity that we need to wean us off a reliance from Russian oil and gas. And they were really clear, and this was a range of companies, small and large, not just the BPs of this world, but a whole range of providers. And they were really clear that after such a difficult few years during the pandemic, when, of course, their profits absolutely nosedived, that they needed a period where they could have time to reinvest. If that doesn't happen, now that obviously they are making very significant profits, then all options are on the table here, because we've got to make sure that we support families. Yeah,
Jesse Norman, former Financial Secretary to the Treasury, I mean, he's been tweeting about that very point, and he said, do those who oppose a levy think oil and gas companies should enjoy a one-way bet in which they benefit from public support when prices fall but make no extra contribution when prices rise?
Well, I mean, look, Jesse makes a very powerful point there, and, you know, we are certainly not ruling it out. I mean, what I would say is, obviously, I'm not ever instinctively drawn to increasing taxes insofar as it risks deterring investment in new capacity and new jobs. But look, these are extraordinary circumstances. We recognise there are extraordinary pressures on family finances, and the industry needs to hear the message loud and clear. If investment doesn't go in, we can't rule out having to do a windfall tax.
73% of those who voted Conservative in 2019 support a windfall tax.
Well, I think the public are absolutely concerned about the situation that they can see.
And you're not ruling it out from what you were saying.
We're not ruling it out. I mean, as I say, we're not at this point making any announcement, but we are definitively not ruling it out.
Sounds like you're softening.
Well, look, we have always said to the industry, and this is something which was communicated loud and clear back earlier in the spring, shortly after the Russian invasion, that we need to see the industry step up to its part of the bargain and invest in North Sea delivery. Because if that doesn't happen, then they are, in effect, just banking the profits and not doing anything to justify those. And these are effectively, as you say, one-off and extraordinary gains for the industry. So the Chancellor is very clear. We're not philosophically attracted to this, but if the situation doesn't improve in terms of them stepping up to the plate, we can't rule this out.
What do you mean by stepping up to the plate?
Investing, putting in these extra profits to actually make sure that they are setting up new fields for offshore oil and gas.
So if they did do that, then you wouldn't be looking at it.
Well, I think if we can see that the industry is reinvesting these profits into the next generation of North Sea oil and gas, which is what we need as a transition fuel, both to help with current supply problems, but also, crucially, to transition the wider economy to net zero.
Surely the argument would be they can do both at the moment, given the amount of money that they're making.
Well, we obviously keep that situation under review. We would love to see, as I say, these extra profits going into something really productive and tangible in the real economy. That's what we'd like the industry to do. That's a signal that we have hoped to send to the industry, and which they, in fairness, more or less committed to when they met the Prime Minister and the Business Secretary and myself earlier in the spring. So it is a test for the industry. Does this investment come forward? And if it doesn't, frankly, reflecting the seriousness of the situation, they can expect the government to have to look at all our options.
Let's talk about the long-awaited Sue Gray report. I read in my morning papers that a Whitehall source is saying Sue Gray is playing politics and enjoying the limelight a little too much. A slur ahead of her report being published later this week. You'd condemn that, I'm sure.
I would. I mean, I think the one thing I would say about Sue Gray, and I've never met her, but I've heard a great deal about her, is that, you know, by repute, she's one of the most fiercely independent and professional civil servants in the whole of government, and brings a vast range of experience to bear. So I don't think there's any politics. There's obviously a range of questions, practical questions, involving doubtless discussion with the police and the civil service authorities about what can go into this report and when it should be published. But in no way do I think is there anything other than a practical dimension to the question of when it comes out, now that the police have concluded their investigation.
Much made of this meeting between the Prime Minister and Mrs Gray, regardless of who called it. I mean, who, we don't know. Why on earth would the PM agree to go to a meeting like this ahead of the report being published?
Well, my understanding is that the meeting was instigated by Ms Gray, but I agree. I don't think that's... well, it matters only insofar as that explains that he wasn't the one instigating it. There are, as I say, there are lots of practical questions here which need to be bottomed out in terms of, for example, who can be named in this report, and the extent to which photographic evidence can be included. And I think it is important that those practical dimensions are resolved. Do I think in any way that the integrity of this report should be questioned? No, because, as I say, Sue Gray has a reputation which dates back decades in terms of her ability to make judgments without fear or favour, and I think she will absolutely deliver it on
Even
that
if it was
basis.
Mrs Gray who called the meeting, and she categorically says that wasn't the case, both sides saying it wasn't them, why would he attend a meeting when... Why didn't he just say, you know what, let's wait until until the report's been published and then we can talk about it?
As I say, well, it will have been, in essence, to have received an update and to...
Why, though?
Well, on the basis, if he were invited to meet, and as I say, it is my understanding that was the basis.
But he could have said no. He's the Prime Minister.
I mean, ultimately he could have done. But look, the point here is, I don't think in any way it would have been improper. Indeed, it would have been somewhat churlish, I think, to have declined to.
But you understand that the optics are not good when ahead of an independent, allegedly independent report, she's a civil servant, so how independent is it? Report being published, the Prime Minister has a private meeting with the person that's writing the report.
Well, the civil service is independent. I think it's really important we reaffirm that this process is totally independent of any political pressure.
Who's her boss?
Well, her boss is Sir Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary.
Boss?
Well, ultimately, the Prime Minister is in charge of the government, but the civil service stands apart from the political structures of government, and Ms Gray, as we've discussed, is one of the most respected arbiters of the civil service. I do not believe in any way that we should conflate the fact that the Prime Minister obviously sets atop the whole of government from the fact the civil service is capable of standing apart from the political issues of the day. And indeed, that's how, for example, going back to 2010, coalition negotiations were brokered, for example. There has to be an element whereby the civil service and government stand apart, and they do absolutely in this case.
But go back to my question, which is the optics, you must accept, are somewhat askew by the Prime Minister going to this meeting.
I really don't think so. As I say, there are lots of genuine practical issues. When publishing a report of this nature, which has significance not just, obviously, for the Prime Minister himself, but crucially for a whole number of people in Downing Street, many of whom, of course, do not have a voice and a platform, very junior civil servants, very junior political staffers. The question of whether any of them are named in this report, the question of what evidence, as I say, is included within it, the questions are not straightforward here, and are genuinely sensitive for people's lives and careers and public profiles. So I think it is important.
But he shouldn't be getting involved with that, should he, if it's an independent report?
Well, as I say, I do not believe that this meeting was anything other than a discussion of the technicalities of the process. And as I say, I think it would be genuinely wrong to impugn that there has been any pressure put on the nature of this report in any way. And I believe that when it's published, we will see that this is a report.
We will. You say the report could be significant for the Prime Minister. In what way?
Well, ultimately, this is a report which is hotly anticipated. The fact we're talking about it now shows the profile which it's attracted over recent...
Could it put his position in jeopardy?
I mean, ultimately, my faith in the Prime Minister is absolute. We've heard from the police last week that they've concluded their investigations, and the Prime Minister received a fine for which he has rightly and I know sincerely apologised. That was for one incident of a slice of birthday cake between me.
No, I understand, but he's overseen a regime where 126 fines have been issued.
Yeah, and he has taken full responsibility about the events in Downing Street, and obviously he's set in train a series of reforms to make sure that that building is running in the most professional possible fashion going forward. But I think we also need to remember, without excusing what happened, but by way of context, the extraordinary pressure that group of people were under during the course of the pandemic, and the fact that they were not, they were working the longest imaginable hours under the most enormous amount of pressure, and that in no way diminishes the seriousness of what happened, but it does provide some context.
Let me just ask you before I let you go, 20 monkeypox cases in the UK so far, more to be, we're expecting, we'll be told about later on today. How worried is the government?
Well, as with any new disease, and obviously after the COVID pandemic, doubly so, we continue to monitor this very, very closely. I think I would say I'm cautious, but I'm certainly not concerned in the sense of sort of feeling any concern about our ability to handle this situation. But crucially, there is a vaccine which is available which works for monkeypox, and all the evidence is that it's spread by physical contact, so it's not an aerosol.
Close physical contact, yeah.
Exactly, and that being the case, the risk of community transmission is much lower. As I said, we have a working vaccine. If people present with symptoms or they have very close contacts, then we are advising that they quarantine for 3 weeks, but the threshold for that is quite high. It really does need to be close physical contact or sexual contact. And
we're hearing about a baby in ICU, aren't we?
I'm not aware of that case. I mean, certainly, we do urge particular caution with the immunosuppressed, with pregnant women, all the groups who are normally more vulnerable. What I would say is we're cautious, but we're certainly not in a position where I would in any way worry the public that this is some repeat of COVID, because it certainly does not appear to be anywhere near the same platform of seriousness.
We must let you go, Minister. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Thanks very much. Looking at the front pages of the newspapers this morning for you, let's start with the Daily Telegraph claiming that the Cabinet Secretary will come under heavy pressure to resign as the Sue Gray report is expected to conclude that he bears ultimate responsibility. Daily Mail says that